Okay, so also at the Square Enix press conference, we got an extended look at the trailer that was released at the recent concert Final Fantasy VII Symphonia thing. So we're going to take a look at that today, and then I'm going to break it down a little bit as well, so we can see some of the new details and some of the exciting things that we haven't yet perhaps seen in as much detail before. So, I'm so excited. There is so much information being put our way now about Final Fantasy VII Remake. It actually, for the first time since its initial announcement, feels like a real, tangible project that we're actually going to be playing. And yes, the release date is next year, but it's March next year, so that is still less than a year away. So in context of the fact that we've been waiting so long, that's not too bad, surely. Alright then guys, so let's take a look at the trailer here, and then I'll give you my thoughts and analysis, of course, afterwards. Okay, here we go. Oh, I love the theme. The world map theme. So, I assume this is the opening cinematic.
These sewer rats appear to call themselves Avalanche, sir.
Heidegger.
You can have it for saving my life. You think he's a keeper?
Oh my god. Y'all gotta look at the bigger picture here. Nothing worth fighting for was ever won without sacrifice.
Help me!
Oh. Okay.
Have you been a good girl?
I heard you're having second thoughts.
I know we have to think big if we're going to make a difference. But not like this. I feel trapped. My turn.
Awesome.
Get going.
Cloud with his girls.
Got you now!
It's the Techno Soldier.
You're not Clown. I have a favor to ask of you. Run away. You have to leave. You have to leave. You bastard! Yeah!
Ah, yes.
Hold on to that hatred.
Dream. Okay. Wow, lots to talk about. It's definitely coming to the PS4, despite rumours it was going to be a next-gen game. Okay, so there are quite a few things that I would like to talk about here as we get into the breakdown and analysis of this trailer. The first thing that struck me as the trailer begun was the music, of all things, actually. And I think that's important because the music for Final Fantasy VII is such an iconic part of the game that, in my view, and not just my view, but the view of many others as well, it is arguably the best Final Fantasy soundtrack and possibly even the greatest video game soundtrack of all time. It is absolutely stunning. It is such a special score that the fact that it was going to, be a part of the remake, as of course it had to be, was something that needed to be done right. And what we've, received so far, for example, the way we got the music in the Guard Scorpion, or the Scorpion Sentinel, as it's now known, gameplay video just before this one, which is a kind of rearrangement of the boss music in that particular video, works very well. And I think the way we get the main theme of Final Fantasy VII, including, the theme that plays in the original game when you're traversing the world map, amongst other places, it's been rearranged in such a beautiful fashion here. I think it works really well as we get to see the opening of the game cinematic. At least that's what I'm assuming this is, though it cuts off before the main game logo would appear on the screen. But it just works so well together, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how the music plays out throughout the course of the remake. So we get to pull back here, of course, and see Midgar. And it's worth noting as well that we now have a little bit more information in terms of how the project is going to be split up. Not a whole lot, but there has been some speculation about whether or not the Final Fantasy VII Remake is still going to be taking place over multiple parts, multiple episodes, which is definitely still going to be the case. I know a lot of people aren't happy with that, but it has been reconfirmed now during this press conference that the game will be split up over several parts, but each part is going to be an epic experience in its own right. Now, as to where this first part is going to end, well, we don't know exactly where, of course, but a lot of us have been speculating, based on the few gameplay videos we've been seeing recently, that it will be taking part during Midgar and perhaps ending as the party leaves Midgar. And that seems to be the case, since I think it was Nomura. It was either Nomura or Katars. He did confirm that the first episode is going to be focusing on Midgar and the events that surround the adventure of Avalanche during that part of the original game. But it is going to be fully fleshed out, so it's going to be a lot more involved than the original game was. And of course, the Midgar section in the original game was quite a big part of the adventure, probably about half of the first disc. And true to the original game, this first episode itself is going to be split over 2 Blu-rays. So it is one release, but the disc, the box, I guess you could say, will come with 2 Blu-rays inside. So that makes me think there's going to be quite a lot of pre-rendered cinematic cutscenes, which, that makes me so happy if that's going to be the case. One of the great things of Final Fantasy VII, and indeed all of the Final Fantasy games, has been the fact that they've just incorporated those pre-rendered cinematic cutscenes, which just ooze the production values that we've come to expect from the franchise. So it's great to see that is, although I'm guessing really here, is going to be returning, but I don't know why else the game would need to be spread over 2 discs, 2 Blu-ray discs, in fact. So I'm hoping that's going to be the case. Now, obviously, some of this is stuff that we've seen before, with the remake, I mean. I know we've seen it all before with the original game, of course. But just look at the detail here as we pan out of Midgar. And it's so true to the original design. It's something quite spectacular, but obviously, being a current generation remake, there's been a lot more time invested into the various details here. And this does look stunning, it really does. So this is, of course, the opening bombing mission, and Square seem really focused on this opening bombing mission because, by golly, are they showing this to us a lot, it seems. So this is where Cloud has disembarked from the train and has going to, meet up or rendezvous back up with Barrett and the rest of Avalanche. You remember he jumps off the train and they go their separate ways briefly, and then as Cloud approaches the reactor, they do meet up again. And here we get a look at some of the Shinra members. So obviously that's going to be President Shinra, who's sitting down. Seems to have had a bit of a redesign there, perhaps not packing as many pork pies, although we can't see as much of him there as perhaps we will do later on. And I'm assuming that's Heidegger in the background there, speaking to him about Avalanche, just, you know, asking what it is that this band of mercenaries is about, what they're going to do about them. And Shinra's just looking there, you know, not too concerned about the situation, just laid back, as we know that he is. And looks like a pretty fun scene here with the motorbikes. This is actually an action gameplay scene. And of course, we do know there's a motorbike scene in the original Final Fantasy VII, which takes place as the form of a mini-game. But that comes right on the heel of the Midgar section of the game. It's actually as you're leaving Midgar, you go ahead and take part in that. Whereas what it looked like in that particular scene there is this is when something to do, because I saw Jesse. I don't know if we'll just go back for a moment and see. Just before this. Yeah, Cloud's on his own in terms of the party, but you can see Jesse riding one of the bikes here. And it looks like one of the train tunnels, doesn't it? That go around the central pillar. So maybe this is something that occurs once we jump off the train. Perhaps they had some bikes in lube waiting, ready to make their escape, should anything untoward happen. So it seems to be a bit of an extra action sequence that didn't occur in the original. And I expect there's going to be a lot more of those, since, of course, the whole game is just that one part of the original being spread out over a full experience. So there's going to be a lot more to it. Yeah, some materia, Cloud. And I just want to check. So here we are in Midgar, in the slums. It looks like there's some fire going on. Actually, no, this isn't the slums, is it? Looks like there's some nice buildings. This is perhaps after the destruction of the pillar, is what I'm thinking. The pillar that Shinra themselves destroy and Avalanche try and stop, but are unable to do so, but are, of course, set up to take the blame for that. And a lot of people are killed, and it looks like this is the after effects of that situation. So we can see the fire and the smoke, and just generally not a nice situation going on here. But you'd think that Avalanche wouldn't be out in the open if that was the case. So maybe that's something else that's going on. Maybe this is to do with the after effects of the original opening bombing mission. Yeah, I'm guessing that's what it is, you know. I think it must be after the original opening bombing mission, because Cloud's by himself. And after that original mission, of course, once they've blown up the reactor, they agree to meet up on the train later on. So maybe that's what it is, some after effects, some shrapnel has been flung into the air from the explosion, has come crashing down into various parts of the city, which is why we're seeing fires around the place. And Cloud is just, you know, making his way through in order to meet up with the rest of the team. And there they are on the train, of course. And here he comes, making his grand entrance. We get to see more of the battle against the Scorpion Sentinel, as it's now known. And more of the after effects of that bombing there. Oh, I get the feeling that the Avalanche members, Biggs, Wedge, Jesse, are really going to have their characters built up, only to have our hopes shattered, I'm sure. We all know what happens to them, unfortunately. And yeah, it has a bit of an emotional impact in the original game, because they all sacrificed their lives. But of course, we don't really get to know them all that well, since all that takes part in such a short amount of time. Whereas here, in the remake, the first episode, which is going to be a full game in and of itself, I get the feeling that those trio are going to be part of the adventure most of the way through. And we'll then, you know, once we've become really emotionally invested into them, we're going to have those emotions shattered, as of course all good storytelling is able to do. And here we see where Aerith and Cloud meet up, and she tries to sell him some flowers. And we have this strange event, which I've spoken about, so I won't go into too much detail here, where those kind of black shadowy figures surround them. And there's various theories as to what they may be, perhaps Sephiroth clones. Some people have mentioned the live stream, but I'm not convinced about that because the live stream is green and it's not evil. That looks evil. But it could be something to do with departed souls, perhaps, since Aerith is, of course, an ancient and has some connection to the planet in that sense. And here we get to see Aerith in action, I believe for the first time in the remake. I don't think we've seen this type of footage before. And, you know, her character design is absolutely stunning. In fact, all of the characters are really well done recaptures. Not recaptures, that's not the word I'm looking for. But they're, they play off the original design so perfectly, I think is what I'm trying to say. But of course, they're a lot more realistic than they were in the original. The original, even for 1997, didn't really go for that realistic design. I mean, yeah, in some of the cutscenes you did, but for the vast majority of the gameplay, if you contrast it to, say, Final Fantasy VIII or even Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy VII had a much more blocky character design. But they've captured that design quite well here, while, of course, bringing it forward into that more realistic modern generation. And it looks like Aerith is casting Healing Wind or some form of limit break here. And of course Barret, who we've seen quite a bit of now, as they fight... Oh, cross-slash limit break, as they fight the mechanical enemies. And here we see Tifa for... I think this is the first time we actually see gameplay footage of her here in the remake. And she does seem to be more realistically proportioned. A lot of people, I think, are going to be divided over that, the way that she's been redesigned here. But I wouldn't put that down to any kind of political correctness. I could be wrong, of course. But it just seems to be consistent. Her redesign here seems to be consistent with the approach that they've gone with for all of the characters, which is to provide that more realistic design to those models. So a lot of the characters here are better proportioned, more humanly proportioned than they were in the original game. And I think they've just been consistent with that with Tifa. But I'm interested in your views as to how you, how you feel about Tifa's slightly new look here. And it is a little bit different than what we're used to, which I think, as I say, is going to perhaps upset a few people. But I'm quite happy with it. I mean, she's still absolutely stunning. She's such a beautiful character. And so is Aerith, to tell you the truth. So they've certainly captured that very well. And, of course, this is where Barret meets up with his daughter Marlene, who irresponsibly, or rather Tifa and Barret irresponsibly, let her run the 7th Heaven bar, because that's not inappropriate at all. And here we are in 7th Heaven. Cloud having his drink with Tifa. Another iconic scene from the original game. Eggs and chips, I like it. And the action is back. So this is where everything goes wrong on the train. Earlier on we saw them on the motorbikes, and it's possibly in the same tunnel here that the train was going through. So once they've jumped out, they make their escape. Yeah, we actually get to see combat with Tifa there. And here we are in the sewers with the two ladies and Cloud. And this is just before the Apps boss battle, which we have seen a little bit of before, but we get to see a little bit more in a moment's time. And the Shinra building. So I expect that to be quite a substantial part of the first game, to tell you the truth. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out, the story in terms of the experimentation with Red 13 and Aerith after she's been captured. And then, of course, we get to really get introduced to Genova and to Sephiroth as well. And this is the first time as well, I think, that we get to see Airbuster, or the Techno Soldier, as I think the President calls him in the first game. And interestingly, there's a timer. So you remember in the original Final Fantasy VII, once you set the bomb for the first Mako reactor as part of the first mission, you have a timed event where you have to escape the reactor before it blows up. But then when you go ahead and set the bomb for the second reactor, there is no timer. It's a very strange situation, but it seems that that has been rectified here in the remake, so there is a limited time to make your escape. And it seems to me that Airbuster looks quite a bit different than his original version. Guard Scorpion, or Scorpion Sentinel, is pretty much exactly as you'd expect him to be in HD. But Airbuster here does have a slight redesign, which I'm liking, I'll be honest with you. Looks a little bit more realistic. By realistic, I mean obviously the graphics are improved. But the original version was a little bit silly, wasn't it? It had that kind of head on the front of it and whatnot. Okay, see a little bit more of Airbuster there. And it looks like it can float. Yeah. And here we get to see Sephiroth. Now, a lot of people have been wondering how Sephiroth is going to be used in the first game, since for the Midgar section of the original Final Fantasy VII, you don't really see Sephiroth. You do see some allusions to him, in the sense that you see the blood trails and the fact that Genova's gone missing, and you hear about Sephiroth and you hear the stories and the legends, and he's really built up as a mysterious character during the first part of the game, which is really something special actually. It really adds to who Sephiroth is as a villain. But obviously, if they were going to do that in the remake, you just never see him, which kind of seems like a strange thing in the sense that he's the game's main villain, and for him not to be in it. So they had to introduce him in some way. And it seems, based on this particular scene here that we're getting a glimpse of, that he's going to appear in memories and in dream sequences, and just basically invading Cloud's mind by the looks of things, as what is going on here. And so clearly Cloud is still in the reactor, but Sephiroth has kind of changed the reality around him. So it seems that Cloud is still acting in the real world here, as we see in a moment, but from his point of view, he's seeing Sephiroth and what is possibly the destruction of his hometown of Nibelheim here. And Sephiroth tells him that he needs him, that he wants him to leave, presumably to leave Midgar, and to perhaps team up with him or something. Obviously that isn't going to happen and they become enemies. Like offering out his hand there. Cloud's having none of it, of course. And just as he brings his sword down, Sephiroth disappears and reality commences. Okay, and he's back in the real world again. Okay, so he's not in the reactor. That appears to be in the streets of Midgar. So perhaps after the opening bombing mission, he's by himself there, so his friends won't know about that. And of course, I think the game is just going to be officially known as the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which makes sense. A lot of people thought that was just a placeholder name for it, but apparently it's not. And yeah, you can pre-order as well. Okay, so yeah, the box itself will come with 2 Blu-rays, as I mentioned, Disc 1 and Disc 2, which makes me think, as I say, there's going to be a lot of cinematic cutscenes involved, because they're the thing that take up the space. If you get the deluxe edition, what else do you get? Steelbook case, art book, soundtrack CD, so the usual stuff, along with some in-game items as well. But the soundtrack CD is definitely something that I would be interested in, because I do love the score, the music from Final Fantasy VII. Alright then folks, well there we have it then, the new trailer for the remake, quite a lengthy trailer as well. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts about that. But thanks for stopping by. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and be subscribed to the YouTube channel for more remake content in the future. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, checking out the video today. Now, perhaps you might consider becoming a YouTube channel member. Doing so not only supports me as a creator, but it also bestows upon you certain cool bonuses, such as the ability to have your name stand out in YouTube comments and live stream chat, as well as having yourself credited in every future upload that I do. If that sounds interesting, check out the join button, which you can find just below if watching on PC.